Were you into sports cards when you were a kid? Have you walked by recently and tried to look to see the price of packs? It's insane because a lot has changed. So today we're going to talk about what has changed in the hobby if you're an old head and you're curious about how it's transformed and morphed. And we're also going to look at what I think is probably one of the top 10 Pete Maravich collections in the world. Probably not, but I think it's pretty cool. What once was a hobby is now a little bit split. It's a little bit of a money machine. If you think about it, it actually comes all down to economics. The generations before us had homes and land and all kinds of things that they could afford, and they could accumulate wealth over the years. My generation had that opportunity if they started early, but for the generations after me, there's not a whole lot to put their wealth in. It took a long time for other sports to gain a following, but today the card market is thriving. Now the business model has changed. When you look at the old school baseball, sure, those are all going to gain value. Those are grail cards. In a time and era where the system was, you just get them out of the tobacco pouch or out of the card packs. The value of them are based on the system that was around. And I think that's how sports cards are moving, which leaves it kind of unclear with the market today. Even in the 90s when we had the junk wax era, there was a lot produced, but for the most part it was collecting. There was some business involved, but the business came from a place of collecting. If you bought a box of Upper Deck for $100, that was probably insane back then, maybe 200. Now it's not just collecting and buying and selling. There's a whole business model around it. So whether you're in that you enjoy is gambling, opening packs, sell, resell, you're trying to make a living off of it. And then there's a subcategory that they call breakers. So the price of boxes have become so crazy because the market has been so overinflated or risen so high, yet to be determined. You have people that buy the box and they sell spots off. So if you want the Pete Maravich of that box, instead of paying $2,000 for the box and not getting a Pete Maravich, you're going to pay $20 for a chance. And if you hit any Pete Maraviches in that box, you get it. So if it's a $10 card, you get it. If it's a $500 card, you get it. It spreads the risk and the liability to everybody in the break. And the breaker makes some money for his time and effort to coordinate the break. Not only that, you used to just be like, hey, I got a Babe Ruth. Like they only made one Babe Ruth card. Now they have what's called parallels. And so they put funky borders, outlines, and patterns in 50 some different varieties around one card. So for every set, say there's 150 cards, there's 50 variations plus or minus depending on the set. Later on, I'll show you a rainbow that I'm working on. That's what they call it, the entire set of one player. I think the product that I'm chasing has 49 variations and I'm stuck at 43, which is pretty common. So if you have sports cards, old ones, or you're new, or you used to do the card thing in the junk wax era, the 90s, that's kind of an update and an overall status check on where we're at. But as I promised, let's get into this Pete Maravich collection. As we go through this recap, I'm going to put the population numbers or the pop numbers on the screen. And what's that tell you? That tells you how rare it is. How many cards people are fighting for, which goes directly to supply and demand and how much people are willing to pay. One thing that I did not talk about is this PSA thing. Unless you've been in the market in the last 5-10 years, you will not have known that cards are being graded. So they go to a third-party company. PSA is the most popular. And you have a couple other companies that are in the mix. But the reality is PSA owns the lion's share of the market. Why this is important is people used to argue the quality of the card. Now we have an agreed upon set of grading rules as to what the quality of the card is. A PSA 1 is barely enough to call it a card. A PSA 10 is a perfect card. It was manufactured perfectly, exactly the way it was designed. Because of that, you don't ever have to wonder of the value because there are value prices matched accordingly to the grade. So in this case, PSA 9 is the second best quality of card that you can get only to yield to the PSA 10. So when I wanted to get back into sports cards because it was a childhood joy, I decided I was going to get every PSA 10 of Pete Maravich from 1970 to 1980. And then the market started going nuts. and cards were going 3, 4, 10 times the price of what they were in 2015 to 2017. In order to make sure that my wife didn't leave me, I decided to go down to PSA 9s because if I was going to collect them all, I don't think she would have been game for that. So the scope in which I'm categorizing this collection is any card from 1970 to 1980 that came out of a pack of something, even food, and it had Pete Maravich on it. So let's get into each individual card. So the first one is the 1970 Pete Maravich rookie. As you can see by the PSA Pop report, that's why it's a hard card to get. Back in 1970, they didn't have third-party graders. The rules weren't made up. The second card is the 1971 Topps Pete Maravich. Now, a lot of people thought that this was a low pop, low print run. There's a lot of controversy about it. I don't think it is a low pop card. I've seen it way too much, but it's still a nice card. And with the pop count, you can see the difference between the 1970 and the 1971. The next card is also a 1971. This is a 1971 sticker. This is a hard card to get in a PSA 9. You can see the pop count, and you can imagine how many kids took that Pete Maravich sticker off to put on their backpack, their folder, their pad of paper, whatever it is. Now the next card is a 1972 Topps. It's just a regular Pete Maravich, his card, and it's in a PSA 9. The next card is a 1972 Icy Bear Pete Maravich. To have a 1972 Pete Maravich Icy Bear in a presumably frozen product or a food product, for it to be kept, maintained, and to make a PSA 10, just look at the pop count. Next one is also a 1972. It's a 1972 comspec. So comspec was a company that started to print cards for 1 year. And that's all they made it. They were very, very thin and not very popular at the time. Last decade or so, they've gained a lot of popularity since the card market boom, and they are very hard to get. Now, this card is the only card that I don't have in a PSA 9 or a 10, and you can tell why because of the pop count. Part of it is it's all I was able to afford, and the other is the amount of 9s and 10s there are. Moving on to 1973, oddly enough, Topps had the only Pete Maravich card, and there was only one, and it's in a PSA 9. It's actually pretty low priced when you look at it comparatively to the other cards. I like the design. I have several of them, but they're not a popular card. Part of that could be because it's an all-star card and not a base card. Unlike 1973, 1974 has 4 different cards of Pete Maravich in which he is on the cards. So the first one is his overall player card, and you can see it's a PSA 9. And the pop count, you can see what that is. Now these next 2 cards are kind of weird. I don't know why they did scoring and scoring average back to back in 1974. Like, who gives a crap? But it was important to them. And so they did a top 3 scoring and scoring average. And as you can see by the cards, they're all 3 the same players. 2 of them have swapped. So in card 144, the first one, here's the pop rate for that. And you'll notice that Pete Maravich is on the right-hand side of the card. In card number 145, you'll know it's the scoring average card, and Pete Maravich is in the center. And here's the pop rate for that. Now, look in between the 10 and the 8. You see that big goose egg? That's the card I'm trying to find. And when I say find it, if there's none in PSA 9 graded, that means I'm trying to find a raw card that will grade as a PSA 9. Or the easier alternative, hopefully with this video it'll help to find the person that has the PSA 10 and buy that from them. But I think that's less probable because somebody probably has a massive Pete Maravich collection where they have all PSA 10s, even with all the small pops that are out there, and that would break up their perfect set. And the last 74 Topps card is the team leaders. So in this year, every team had a card that had the leading scorer, the leading assist, the leading rebounder, and the leading free throw person. Moving on to 1975, you'll see we have 3 cards. The first one is the solo Pete Maravich. The next card is the New Orleans Jazz team leaders card, just like we talked about in 1974. And the last card's kind of weird. The team checklist has a photo of the team on the front. So it's got Pete. You can barely see him, but It's a hard card to get in a PSA 9. I'm guessing the Topps had an abundance of cardboard in 1976 because they went bigger than the Tallboy. From the 1970s rookie, that was big enough. In 76, they went to, let's go to the Tallboy XL, and they printed these monstrous things. Now in this set, there is an individual player card of Pete Maravich, and you'll see the pop report here. And the next card is the All-Star card. So hopefully they learned from 1973 that you can't just have a All-Star card as the only card in the set. Now sadly, I could not find my 1977 Pete Maravich. And it's just a normal card. And I actually kind of really like the card, so I'm kind of bummed because I think I have 2 or 3 of them. Now with that said, you will see these 4 cards. This is something that's kind of neat and interesting. Each one of these years have 8 or 9 cards of what they call proofs. These are the cards that Topps printed off in different colors only to show the contrast and make sure that the final card was going to be as they designed it. So back in the 90s when Topps went out of business, somebody went in and they started calling it the Topps Vault, and they started auctioning stuff off and selling it to the public. So I have 4 of these proofs out of the 8 or 9 for the 1977 Topps Pete Maravich. Now at this time that I bought it, there were 6 total, and I missed out on the auction for the other 2. So that makes 6 we know where are. And so that means I need to find 2 or 3 other cards from 1977 from the Topps Proof Vault to complete the rainbow. So if you know someone that has them, I would love for them to get in contact with me, and I'd like to have a conversation. Now in 1978, there was only one Pete Maravich player card, and we have that in a PSA 9. In 1979, it's the same thing, and here's the pop count for that. You can tell that the last 2 years, pop counts have gone up quite a bit, and they're not as rare as the previous years. And we're going to close this off with the retirement year of Pete Maravich when he was traded to the Celtics, and that was 1980. In this year, they did cards kind of weird, as you can see, but there's only 2 variations of the card. For this card, it was probably the easiest for me to get PSA 10s, and so I had the option, and so I got both 9s and 10s in both cards. Now, the only thing that could round out this collection in my mind is if I could find a comspec that was the highest grade of comspec that's out there. And I'm willing to guess that the guy who owns the 74 card 145 PSA 10 probably owns that comspec as well. But I'm willing to have a conversation. I just know that the price point based on the population, I think there's 13 in existence PSA graded. I would be willing to give it a good try for partial trade or purchase. Long term, would I like to own a PSA 10 Pete Maravich of every card from 1970 to 1980? I would. I have 4 or 5 of them already. That means I only have 15 cards to go. And I think the last Pete Maravich PSA 10 rookie card from 1970 sold for $125,000. And that was before the boom in 18. So I might need to win the lottery or get a really good following on YouTube. A really good following. Well, hey, the goal of this video was to get people caught up. Cards are an integral part of history. There's a lot of people that as a child collected cards, and I would say it was an important part. Now it's turned into a little bit of an investment / collection, and I find joy in it. It reminds me of times when I was a kid and a certain mentor that I had, Ron Adams, who gave me time that I didn't think that I deserved. And that time and attention and that relationship at the time was way more needed than he'll ever know. And it was part of me being a rebel. I would have my paper route and I would take my $8 or $10 and go blow it on cards after my paper route before I got home on Saturday, and my mom would get livid. Like mad. And so in some way, I love you, Mom. That was my rebellion, and I think it all worked out. FYI, all those cards that I bought were the junk wax era, and none of them ended up being worth anything, and my mom was right. I actually just got back into it in 2018, and so it's been 7 years and 50,000 cards. I should really think about my life choices. But it's been fun, sort of. If you like the content, do me a favor, like and subscribe. Help us out as we're trying to grow and build a weird, crazy community. And as always, do me a favor. If someone hasn't already asked you this week, make the day you deserve. For the PSA 9, to find it raw, I don't know if I'm willing to go crazy. I would rather hassle the person that has the PSA 10, honestly, because this is a $20 card. And if you look on eBay right now, I've jacked that price up to $120 because I keep buying the PSA 8s and people think that there's an actual market. I email them and say, hey man, I'm literally the only asshole buying these. I think one other person's bought one because they thought there was a market, and I literally have created the market. And this is what we call a rainbow. This row right here is to number 25. So there's only 25 of these cards produced, and they put the number on the back. The top row are the to 5s. Now of these cards, there should be more right here on top of it, and these are the one of ones that I don't have because there's only 3 of them, 3 different prints, and they're one of ones. There's only one. That's why they call them one of ones. It's like there's like one of them, so it's called a one of one.